There are moments in every person's life when they face intense adversity. They're crucibles that forge who they become as individuals and as leaders. Now more than ever, we need leaders who are called to a higher standard, focused on leaving it better than they found it, and paying it forward to the next generations. Now, let's join Fire Chief Randy Bruegman as he speaks with leaders from all walks of life, as he explores and learns from their personal journeys and the crucibles that have forged them into better leaders and better people.
Leadership isn't just about making decisions. It's about building the character required to make the right ones when it matters most. In this episode, I'm joined by retired U.S. Navy Rear Admiral Mike Studeman, former Director of Intelligence for both the U.S. Indo-Pacific and Southern Commands, and the author of Might of the Chain, Forging Leaders of Iron Integrity. Over 35 years of service, Mike led global intelligence teams, briefed presidents, and helped shape America's national security strategy. Today, he continues to advise top organizations on leadership and resilience. Together, we explore why integrity is the foundation of influence and how trust is earned one decision at a time, and why courageous leadership is the antidote to today's crisis of trust. If you want to build a leadership legacy that truly lasts, this is a conversation you won't want to miss. My name is Chief Randy Bruegman, and this is the Leadership Crucible Podcast. Well, Mike, welcome to the Leadership Crucible Podcast. It's truly an honor to have you on the show today.
Randy, it's great to be here. Good to see you again. Look forward to our line of inquiry.
Oh, well, thank you. You know, you've led intelligence operations, tactical missions for national security efforts. And when you look back, what's one leadership moment that really tested you during that time frame?
Well, I think I was tested before I ever put on a uniform, and I think that this is actually an important thing. What you take in your profession sometimes is shaped in your childhood. And I tell a story in my leadership book about when I was a kid, 10 years old, and I had the three brothers, all of them that were younger than me, and we were in Italy, living in Gaeta. My father was on the flagship of the Sixth Fleet, and so we were overseas. And I created this game where you would roll marbles off of the fourth story level into the streets, and you were trying to hit trash cans and make a big noise and scare cats and things like that. And my rule to these boys that were kind of a family that was just in our same apartment complex was to not roll, when there were people or a car going by. And we've been doing this for some time. And the youngest of the kids was about to roll, and there's this car, it was gunning its engine all the way through the street here in Italy, the Mercedes or whatever. It was like roaring down the street. And I was about to say, hey, don't roll. And that kid just let a marble like zing out, and it came down, and we heard this huge crash as the marble hit the windshield, and the screeching of tires, and then the Mercedes plowed into a wall. And I was flabbergasted, I was shocked, and I pulled the boys inside, and the Carabinieri, the Italian police, came very quickly and discovered what side of the building it was, and the Campisi boys admitted it was them. And I had to actually take responsibility at that time. So when we talk about lessons in integrity and accountability, I had the choice at that point to sort of say, hey, it's all of us, whatever, and just have a little bit of responsibility. I took all responsibility for it as the eldest of those with the idea that I had, and that things went wrong. And ultimately, I had to pay for an entire windshield, which took up all of my babysitting money that I'd been doing around town for an entire summer to pay it off. And so responsibility, accountability was something I assumed, and I learned that early. That's just what you have to do if you want to do the right thing.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine there were some interesting discussions with your mom and dad.
I had a lot of those in Italy because those were my wilding years. I learned more in a foreign country as a young kid about what to do, what not to do, and so yeah, lots of different ways that you grow up,
Yeah.
and sometimes the hard way.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Sometimes those hard lessons are the ones that kind of shape who you become. So,
Exactly.
yeah. So you've written a book, The Might of the Chain, which I'm really enjoying, by the way. This is a very excellent book. But just tell us a little bit about, I guess, the impetus for you to write that, and explain Might of the Chain for everybody.
Might of the Chain, and the subtitle is Forging Leaders of Iron Integrity. Might of the chain comes from the fifth law of the Navy, which goes, on the strength of one link in the cable dependeth the might of the chain. Who knows when thou mayst be tested, so live that thou may bearest the strain. And essentially, it is a part of a Navy poem that points out that everyone's going to have to lean on each other. Your chain has to interlink with other links to be able to be successful together on anything significant. You can't be your own, your link off on your own to be successful in life. That really it's about teaming and uniting. And so are you a stainless steel link in the chain? Are you a rusty, cracked link in the chain? And so my book is broken down into three parts, where the first part is about how you develop your own link to be ready to be a part of that chain. The second part of it is a series of leadership traits that deal with the team and what it takes for the team to come together and create that chain network, right? And then the third part is about, okay, now you're going to do the heavy lifting, and here's some leadership characteristics that relate to making change and making a difference in life. And there's some different dynamics at work there too. So that's what the book was about. And I wrote it as soon as I retired after 35 years in the Navy, because I looked around and said, oh my gosh, there's so many things that we are doing inside the military where we honor, we encourage, we nurture leadership in the right way. And then you look at the rest of society and you go, look, whether it's ethical issues with politicians, moral courage by Congress, whether it's what's happening in the business community, whether you're seeing, lack of courage in academia or think tanks, across the board, and the statistics from lots of different studies showed it, that the trust in American leadership was on a major decline, right? Most people don't trust their government, their media. They don't see leaders that they want to emulate in their own workplaces. And so I thought it's time to add my voice to how to do leadership the right way. I learned from many great leaders, right, along the way. And so I tried to funnel all of that into a readable book that isn't a tome. It's not an autobiography. It skips around and tries to highlight those things that people with, less time on their hands can consume, and they can, get the takeaways and move on and action in their life somehow.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's such a timely book. Just the events of the last couple of weeks and some of the things that have come out, and from Congress and the media, and it's just the lack of integrity that we're witnessing is it's really appalling. And I'm just really concerned that the younger generation is just consuming that and saying that's just the way it is, and it shouldn't be.
I agree. You have to operate with character in everything that you do. And when you begin to compromise that character, what happens is that you actually blow the all critical thing related to trust, right? And if you don't have that glue that's there, then people look askance at you. They're very suspicious of what your intentions are, whether or not you're going to personally benefit, politically benefit, whatever. So this is the divide that exists today, is that the most powerful people, right, are the ones that are are not able to muster up the right kind of leadership skills that you can unite the country behind principles and values that we can all get behind, with a vision for our organizations and our country, and then to execute in a way where how you execute it becomes just as important as what you're trying to achieve,
Yeah.
right? All of that depends on the fundamental pillar uh, behind everything: good character. And when you don't have good character, then you have a breakdown of all that trust that you need to be able to get anything serious done in life.
Yeah, no, very, very true. And I think we're at a crossroads right now in this country, and it'll be interesting to see, what transpires in the next decade. But I'm sensing that there's a shift that is occurring, and I think we're going to see the level of accountability start to rise over the next several years. That's my hope, anyway.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, you are what you do. You are what your choices are, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so, character and and principles and morality and ethics, they all show up in those small, seemingly innocuous decisions, but it's like thousands of them over time that create a habit. And you can have thousands of them that were morally weak, then end up with a highly morally corrupt person later on in life because they've just learned that they can get away with something or what have you. And so this is how great leaders operate. They know that every small decision adds up, to something much, much larger. And in fact, if you want to put it on a country scale, you're talking about the moral legitimacy of the United States in the world. So how you carry yourself, what you say, how you treat people, how you treat other countries, can actually build up the friendships and partnerships, and you can work together in a coalition to get some of the hard things facing our planet done. Or you can end up, fissuring and fracturing and fragmenting
hmm
this group of people you need to work with. And this is the fundamental, mistake that I think we're not fully comprehending right now, that how you go about achieving your objectives, right? How you think through and develop the team that you're going to need to work with to get them done really, really matters. You can't go off independently and expect that the world's going to change at the snap of your fingers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've run organizations and systems where if you don't build the foundation, it never holds up. I mean, whatever you're trying to accomplish, if you haven't laid the groundwork and the foundation to build on, you're just not successful. And, I think that's one of the things that's occurring throughout our system today.
There's an African proverb that goes, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And we're seeing kind of the lesson kind of in play at today, that when you want to go fast and break things, you're probably not going to go very far.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll have to see what transpires over in the next several years. But you've dealt with a lot of global threats from China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and those are really complex situations. So how do you balance clarity and decisiveness when you're working through some of those really complex scenarios?
Yeah, I do think there's always ambiguity in everything you do. And people, if you wait till you get like even 60% of the information before you act, you're probably acting, too late. And some of the hardest decisions for leaders are those 50-50s, right? And
hmm
sometimes you have to do that. Time is not on your side. If you don't act, something's going to get worse, or you'll miss an opportunity, that's very fleeting. You got to judge what kind of circumstances you're in, of course, right? Whether or not something allows you to learn more and be able to further define the outlines of your challenge or whatever. So there's a discernment issue that comes into this sort of balance between clarity and decisiveness. And so I'll just tell you, on the nation state level, it's pretty clear kind of what the strategic objectives, the intentions, the patterns of behavior, are. And so that's a easy guide for you to be able to contextualize, what is happening. But that doesn't mean that some events that you see are, all crystal clear. In fact, I mean, many of them are highly ambiguous for painfully long periods of time, and you still got to act, right? My job as an intelligence officer, of course, was to get to ground truth, and
Hmm.
the best approach I found was something that Colin Powell once said, which was, it's called the Powell Principle of intelligence. Make sure that you tell somebody, what you know, number one, what you don't know, number two, what you think or what you assess, number three, and always distinguish the difference between the three, right? As the fourth part of that. And so that's what we do. So when you're dealing with lack of clarity, you must explain where clarity ends and where you're stepping into an unknown. But you don't just say, well, have at it. You actually say, now here's what I think about what this means, or here's what I think the next step would be, or here's what we assess would be going on given past behaviors or something like that.
Yeah.
You've got to be really clear about what those dividing lines are.
Yeah, I mean, we see that throughout government, local government, where they'll make decisions based upon not doing that assessment, right? And the outcomes usually aren't good. So, I mean, they don't put the time and effort into gathering that intelligence as much as they can before they make a decision.
Yeah, if it's, when it's blurry, you have to go the extra mile to be able to put a confidence level against anything you're transmitting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually a learned skill. You've got to make sure that you know how to validate information, you know how to evaluate it, you know how to wait where you heard it from and whether or not it's true or not. And people start opinionating like almost too soon. Sometimes you can't disentangle the facts of a case with what somebody thinks, much less their prescription about it. And it all actually is very important that you understand where it's high confidence fact and where maybe it's lower confidence and something less than fact, because you're building a decision based on all of that. And you don't want to base it on weak sand or have two of your four pillars, be cracked and are going to tumble out underneath you. And frankly, that's the danger of the amount of disinformation and misinformation that exists in our society today. But everybody has an opinion based on whatever their life experiences and their bias or whatever media source they're listening to. And so it's incumbent on anybody making a major decision these days to really work hard to validate, their information before they decide on any action.
Yeah, and you've worked with a lot of multi-international teams, and many of them that did not report to you. So how did you balance that out as you made these assessments?
Yeah, I think when you're dealing with partners of all types, in my case, it might be other services, it might be other agencies within the government, it might be industry or academia, think tanks, or international partners. And it's all the same.
Mm-hmm.
You need to humble yourself in front of your team to be able to connect and to learn. Coming in with a sense of superiority or with your demands, it doesn't work. You got to come in with a sense of co-equals, right? Where you are going to need to learn and listen more than transmit and teach. And respect where other partners are coming from, because they have their own constraints and they have their own limitations and capabilities. So it really does require you to subordinate yourself to a degree, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be able to figure out how to be a good member of a team that is only held together by the trust that you create. There's nothing that, forces them to obey what you want, right? You have to have the power of persuasion. You're more persuasive on certain issues when you've built the amity, right? You've built the connection based on that all-important element of trust that we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And that requires empathy. It requires patience. It requires, not rushing in and expecting at a first meeting that you're going to solve problems. That no kidding, you got to have, like in the Middle East, you're going to have tea a lot of times or coffee or whatever, before you might build up to the point where people are softened and ready to work together. Because usually working together means that somebody's got to give up something.
Yeah.
Right. And it's usually, pretty tough on partners to be able to do that without, the case being made that it's in everybody's interest to proceed along a certain path.
Well, and I think that whether you're in business or government or community roles, I think understanding what the strategic objectives are and being able to kind of outline, what everybody's piece of that puzzle is pretty critical. And you have to do that, you have to build a relationship first.
Exactly right. I also think that if I were take a look at the American behaviors, that we do need to realize that sometimes you have to stoop to conquer. In other words, you have to, lower your expectations, lower your sense of your own way that you measure your own power, perhaps, right, or your own agency. That you really, if you really want to overcome things, you have to kind of bring it down a level, and I think have more, strategic patience.
Mm-hmm.
Like these are like altruism, selflessness, strategic patience, and empathy. Those kinds of things are actually endangered species, it appears, in many parts of American society. To the extent that we don't develop those, nurture them, express them, we're going to have a harder time, uphill battles, right? Maybe Sisyphusian attempts to be able to get over the hill with some of our objectives. And so we need to kind of go back to the basics here and start out as a partner being a good person, right? That's, say what you mean and make sure you do what you say.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that in local government. I mean, from a standpoint of they make short-term decisions that have long-term ramifications. And they're not looking at, what the next generation, how it's going to impact it, maybe the next generation or the next set of elected officials. So they're just making a short-term decision based upon, it's good for them. And it may not be good for the community or the organization. And it's unfortunate. And so I think your point's well taken, is that having a long view and laying that foundation that you can create respect and mutual respect between whoever you're working with is extremely important.
Yeah, there have been books written about this, and usually the biggest issues are not right versus wrong, but it's right versus right, degrees of right there. And so is it, when you take a look at the individual versus a community or society, like which one should have the preference, right? How do you balance those? When it's the short term versus the long term, pros and cons, how do you do that? If it's justice versus mercy, do you lay down the law, or do you have some, forgiveness and compassion based on an innocent error? I mean, the list goes on, right? In ethics, those tend to be the harder choices, and they're shades of gray, and there requires real judgment. And that judgment needs to be based on, individuals' development of their own ethical foundation, their moral principles, their ability to truly see through another's eyes, understand a situation clearly, and then make a good choice that doesn't ever sort of weight totally one way or another, because usually the answer is somewhere on that tightrope walk in between each of those extremes.
Yeah. Very, very true. For young leaders coming up, especially those that are in high pressure fields, what's your advice for forging that iron integrity early in their career?
I think it's small. I think it starts with the small habits that they have. Do you tell the truth to your parents, to your friends, I'm not talking little white lies. I'm talking, some people develop skills that may be effective for a time, but they're really not actually building the right kinds of skills there. Are you a learner, right? Are you learning from accomplished people that have shown the way before? Like, who are your heroes, right? Have you been able to model yourself off of somebody that truly deserves your respect and inspiration? And so there's a whole way, I think, of approaching this, depending on what you want to be in life, who you want to be, and how you want to develop your skills to, end up contributing to your world. And I think that it requires a sense of, being a citizen, not simply, building up your own wallet. I think you have to obviously take care of yourself and your family. But how do you become a good citizen along the way? How are you a good community member, right? How are you a good friend, partner, colleague, et cetera? These are all choices that you make, especially early on in life, through your teens and 20s. And, when you're doing it right, you'll know it's right. You know you're on the right, path. And it's usually going to be a series of tough situations, right?
Yeah.
Where the easy thing is to do it the wrong way, and the hard thing is to do it the right way. And it's going to create uncomfortable moments, whatever. Accountability may fall on your shoulders and it may have a cost. But if you're an honorable person, then you're developing that along the way. If you're dishonorable, you know it. In your quiet moments, there are small slices of shame. The problem is when people get so used to that they're numb now to what they should be shameful about.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've seen a lot of that. I mean, I've seen a lot of that through my career. It becomes acceptable to do the wrong thing.
Right, and that's an accountability issue, and whether or not people around that person help them along the way. They exact accountability, or they don't. And look at the national level. You're seeing it playing out right now. You have people that are not following the rule of law, regulations, whatever, and they're getting away with it. And therefore, there's no accountability. Therefore, they'll do it again, which actually impacts civil liberties and, lots of other things. And so accountability, whether it's micro or macro, it all matters, and start early and do it right along the way. And, find the right kind of mentors and coaches that can, guide you along your path, because it's not easy to mentally figure it out or even emotionally figure it out. You're going to need people in your life that can help you, nudge left or nudge right to keep on sort of that middle way, the path to true honorable living.
Yeah, I've always shared that, and I truly believe this, that accountability is muscle memory, and if you practice it every day, it just becomes part of who you are, and if you don't practice it, it becomes part of who you are.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. And so this is another analogy is take a look at whether or not you're guided in life by a weather vane or the moral compass that points to true north. That moral compass is all important. And that's comes from inside you, right? Versus the environment sort of, just making you make whatever choices in your own best interest from the outside. A weather vane, it'll circle around and it'll hit true north every now and again, just accidentally, but that's no way. So somebody might get some things right and still be, lost in that regard with regard to their ethical basis. But it really is important to be able to, know what you're doing in life and to do it the right way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you talked about when we started the crucible moment when you were a young child, but have you had others as you got into the military? Was there one or two moments that really impacted who you are now?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. My heroes, I was, my father's Navy, deployed, when I was young. I was very independent minded, was out. I had my own, authors, and Steinbeck, Kipling, Jack London, Forrester, the Hornblower series. I mean, all those, characters. So I always admired physical courage and moral courage. What I found was in the intelligence community, as I worked through the ranks, that sometimes things were being left on the table the things not stated because some people were too scared to be able to contribute to a discussion with senior officers, right? The rank intimidated them. And I observed this, and I said, that can't be the way that we make good decisions as a country, or good decisions with regard to the military instrument. I mean, we have had a checkered past in the United States with regard to some choices that we've made, and we can't afford to make mistakes because people aren't courageous enough to call out the truth or share what they know. And so I decided to not be that way, that I would speak truth to power no matter the personal cost, no matter the career impacts. And so in countless occasions, right, with senior officers there, I would have to like tactfully try to correct something that was like a slight, misread of something over there or whatever. And by the time I was, and I think it was, people recognized, hey, you're going to get that. It's going to be right down the middle from Studeman there. And hopefully I showed other people that they too can be morally courageous in the cockpit of decision making when the chips are down, your guts are turning, your palms are sweaty, but you have to speak up, right? If you really want to direct things where they need to go. In the book, I describe Chairman General Milley, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who came out to Indo-Pacific when I was the Director of Intelligence and 2-star flag officer. My 4-star, was briefing him at a big map board of the Asia-Pacific. And the chairman didn't think we needed to worry about China as much as we were worrying about it, particularly in terms of contingencies related to Taiwan and all the rest. He thought we had until the 2030s or the 2040s. And, look, the Japanese had a hard time, taking islands, and then when they were dug in, it was going to be almost impossible for Americans to dig them out. We had these bloody battles, right, in the Western Pacific. And the 4-star looked at me when the chairman kind of was done with trying to say, you don't need to worry so much about this being a 2020s military issue of, let's say, the Chinese taking over Taiwan. And he looked at me because he knew I had something to say on the matter. And I was in the second row right behind the chairman, and I took him on. And I said, General, the better analogy here is not, taking a Japanese island back from them during World War II. The better analogy in the case that we're dealing with is Operation Husky, which was when we invaded Sicily in World War II, and it was ugly. And the Italians and the Germans were there, but we got it done. And this could be equally ugly, but the Chinese might be able to get it done if we don't build up more capability, put it forward in the Pacific, and make it clear, right, that we are going to be promptly responding if China tries to resolve something through physical force. Anyway, it's one of those moments where everybody else, can see, hey, don't look at me kind of thing. And, for me, I had built up the habits of speaking truth to power. And so that was another test for me to carry on the way I had started, which is to say, you need to, be able to face the consequences regardless of what they are in order to make sure the truth gets out.
Well, and I would imagine General Milley appreciated that.
He harumphed. I think he respected the fact that somebody else knew their history enough to actually engage in a historical comparison. I think he respected that. I think he remained skeptical about whether or not, China and the PLA would have the confidence and the capability to do it. Those are the right, points of skepticism to have, but they had built up so much awing power now, and we hadn't done what we needed to do to set our theater and get the right kind of forces forward with the right kind of weapon systems. So it was a grand debate for a long time within DoD about how quickly we needed to focus on the Indo-Pacific.
Yeah. And it's still a debate that's going on today.
Yeah, you're right.
So for someone just beginning their leadership journey or stepping into their first leadership role, what key lessons would you share with them?
Yeah, I would say that the lesson is, to begin with, to be an active learner. and not to simply sort of take your formal education and say, I'm going to bank it. I can operate. I don't need to do any more learning going forward, except those things which were, official, part of a, some kind of training regime in an institution. The act of continuous, never-ending learning is the difference maker between those who actually become much more influential over their own destiny and can make a huge difference in life, and it profits in every way. If you aren't a self-learner, then I think you will struggle, right? And so this question of, okay, you got your degree, you got maybe your, maybe it's a vocational degree, maybe it's a college degree, at a university, whatever. Now, what do you do? And I would just say that the lessons that everyone will teach you that it's accomplished is that you have to actually ingest other forms of learning all the time. I have an entire, you see the bookshelves behind me, right? I could kind of open up and say, hey, there's a lot more, right? Where all this came from, right? And, what I personally do is that when I read a book, unless it's fiction, but the nonfiction books, I will go ahead and highlight those because I know my brain. I can't memorize all those things. I'm going to have to go back to it and get reinforcement.
Mm-hmm.
So my habit, which I learned early in life and from studies, was to say anything new I learn, anything that's worthy of kind of excerpting out and coloring, then I'm going to do that. And still today, I could go to any one of these books, pull it out, and I can re-access that wisdom and that knowledge, and it's efficient and it's effective. Today, maybe on your digital device, you can do that too. You can highlight. I argue that most people probably aren't going to delve back into their digital world to find something. There's something about tactile in front of you and being able to physically bring it down. That's my technique. What works for you, figure it out, but you need to be a continual learner, in life. Secondly, in terms of like early lessons, who are you modeling yourself after? Is it the guy with the big, colorful personality that happens to be, entertaining to watch, right? That kind of gets their way and is impressive in terms of their alpha energy, right? Is that who you're impressed by? Or is it somebody else that has different qualities, that appears to be more thoughtful, that truly has, the right kind of influence over others, has a sense of, calm or soberness or wisdom or whatever? You can make your choices with regard to who you decide you want to be like. And so be very careful with your choices. You can be entertained by alpha energy, person X, but you may not want to model your life or how you approach other people based on what you're seeing there. And it's very important. And sometimes you can look at people around you and they're directly in your circle. It could be a family member. My father, he was a great example for me. I have my own heroes, right, in terms of military leaders or others. And so the question is, who are you making a hero in your life, right? And then thirdly, with regard to lessons, is that be very careful of like the myth of being a leader that simply is take charge, issue orders, roll over, whatever people or things are required to get something done. That's actually a primitive form of leadership, which is sort of past its time.
Yeah.
Those kind of leaders may look like they're being effective, but they're actually seeding the seeds of their own destruction, right? And you see this at the national level now with who we have in key positions of power. You will probably fail if you use sort of this stereotypical thing. Read some books, and Brene Brown is a good example. Dare to Lead, right, is a great one. Stanley McChrystal has a book out called Leaders. You've got my book as well that explains, how do you actually be a balanced leader, developing all those qualities, because it's not what you think. It's not what Hollywood would lead you to believe about what it takes to become an effective leader. So those are three examples of, how to create habits that are winning.
Excellent advice. I think that as you pointed out, the degree gets you in the door sometimes, or whatever, the certification, but it's what you do after you're there that really, leads to who you become.
That's right. You're on a gradual journey throughout. How do you make the most of your time? It's not like you study leadership all the time, or whatever, but how do you actually intersperse, your routine with things that allow you to continue to grow and learn as a person? And you can learn from other professions that will apply to yours. I mean, don't just stick to your own. In fact, the most incredible people I've met, they had different tours, and they were exposed to different, mission sets and different organizations. And then they were able to, see how others were doing it and bring it back into their own profession. And so they call this the Medici effect. Have you ever heard of that?
Hmm.
Where the Medici family brought in, artists and sculptors and painters and architects, whatever, and they were all under the same sort of estate, and they were able to see what one another was doing, and so the part of the Renaissance was that they were able to just take off together because they had been able to, see what these creatives were working on, what the scientists were thinking about. And there were all sorts of connections in between that led to breakthroughs because they exposed themselves for something outside of their core, profession or talent.
Yeah, no, I often tell young officers in our profession, if you want to really become a good leader and understand where our profession is probably going to go in the future, don't read fire service related books only.
Read them, but then
Yeah, then
read so
read
much
others.
more.
Yeah, and so many of my colleagues, I mean, they're just that's all they're focused on. I said, no, there's a whole other world out there, and that's where we're in competition with, and we need to be, part of that. And that's changed a lot. When I came on the job, I mean, you just never saw anything outside of the fire service vernacular, if you will, and the books. And new set of leadership is doing exactly what you say.
Yeah, that's great advice, Randy. And I'll just say, hey, you may not be looking for something that sparks an idea, but when you expose yourself the way you're talking about, when you reach out into other places that are more alien, maybe a little more uncomfortable to be there, your brain starts firing, and you see stuff and go like, wait, I could apply that,
Yeah.
solution or, idea or technique over here, right? And all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's a windfall of insight that then you can apply, and it's amazing kind of things can take off.
Yep, agree. So as with the next generation of leaders that are just coming up, what challenges do you think that they're faced with today?
Well, I mean, the global challenges and the local challenges are kind of intermixing, right? Climate change, nobody escapes climate change. Nobody escapes pandemics that might rage in the future. And nobody escapes economic challenges of a more fragmented, balkanized world where, great powers are exerting themselves and willing to use force to get their way. I mean, on that level, the world is a far more dangerous, volatile place and becoming more Hobbesian than ever. And so I think that the challenges are legion for folks. You used to be able to worry about, your job, your track, the speed of your, promotions and your family, where to live and all. Now you have to actually be very attuned to all of these things that do have a direct impact. So the question is how young people begin to have agency to develop an ability to shape their future, right? And a lot of this is like how are you learning about these issues, and then ultimately, I think it's about where you vote and who you support until you become immensely influential or powerful yourself. In the meantime, as a young person, you can contribute to somebody else who's further along in the chain to become like that office holder who does have the power to it. So being very discerning and discriminating in a good way, right? Being able to look at, people for what they really stand for, like to try to clean out the cons that you find a lot of people running for office or are delivering to the American people. That becomes the key skill. Like, are you only listening to one form of news, and therefore you're gonna guarantee it's gonna be that candidate because this one news source and this podcast told you here, or are you gonna actually run the field, do your own independent analysis, and be able to really understand what's going on, validate your information, and then pick the right people for those jobs, because who's in those positions really matters in terms of whether or not you're going to be able to deal with these challenges, both prepare for them and become more resilient as a community, as a nation, as an international community, or if things are going to be slow, ugly, and you're just going to face challenge after challenge after challenge. A lot of that depends on who we empower before we ourselves might be empowered to deal with them from a position of more strength and from some title that gives you the ability to lead on some kind of magnitude.
Yeah, and I think that's a real challenge today to find the accurate information, if you will. I mean, when I was growing up, this was before social media, of course, but there were 3 television stations, and you could flip through the 3 channels, and the information would be the same. The delivery may be a little different, but the facts were the facts. And today, you really have to do your homework to find what the true truth is.
Well, there's a chart out there that's famous that has been issued for years now that has essentially in one viewing, it shows you what's down the line in terms of non-biased, and then all of the outlets and news stations and radio and whatever, cable, all the way out to extreme right, extreme left, right? And it gives you an ability to go decide whether or not you want to stay in your echo chamber, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, it's a safe place for you, or whether or not you want to go right into the center to find independent, even-handed, balanced, and factual, sources of information. That chart, you go online, you can look at it. It's been updated over time, and it'd be interesting for everybody that may be listening to this podcast, print it out and go circle what you actually listen to in your car or home or on your iPhone or whatever. And you might find that you're skewed too far one way or another, right? And so there are tools that people can use to be able to fight this. And it starts from your own willingness to spend the time to search for truth and not be essentially deluded and deceived by others on the wings that have a different agenda in mind to confuse you or to dupe you into something that just isn't quite true.
Yep, good point. And I think their agenda typically, when they're far left or far right or far left, is not typically the agenda that you want to follow.
I think most of the country actually in their heart of hearts is more center if they actually laid out all the issues there, but our political system, makes it very difficult now. I'm hoping maybe we get a third party or something that changes it, but we got some introspection to do as a country with regard to our, our Constitution, how we've architected ourselves and whatever. These are big issues that do deserve some work over time. In the meantime, we have to make the best of our condition, and that means, as a responsible citizen, that you don't just become some kind of sap for somebody else's political agenda. Like, do your homework. That much is at stake. We're seeing that, and so it's worth your time there. And it's scary for people. In most cases, they've done the studies to show that people stay in their echo chambers because that's where the psychological safety is, because their tribe, their community, their state, whatever, believe something. And the worst thing for you as a person is to be able to just kicked out of the tribe because you have a different view. And so, all the motivations exist in the world for you to actually be a good tribe member. The question is, how good is your tribe? Right? Is your tribe on the right side of history, on the right side of what we should be doing? I think the most courageous, strong people I admire, people that actually make a difference in this world, are the ones who can actually say, you know what, I love my tribe, I love the people in it, but I am going to learn and make my own choices about what I think the right thing to do is.
Yeah. Yep. I totally agree. So, Mike, final question for you today. What advice would you offer to the next generation to really make a meaningful difference?
Yeah, I think we touched a little bit on that in terms of some of the ways that they develop themselves there. I do think that people need to become much more self-disciplined with regard to what they personally do. I mean, I think that social media postings and all the rest, I mean, that runs rampant. And I would ask people maybe, because it's so core to our lives today, like, how are you carrying yourself in your profiles, right? Where, what social media on, and how are you responsibly using your voice to contribute to something that's right, good, and true? If you're just throwing because your day was tough and you think you're going to throw some invectives or some emotion or sensationalize something, you're just getting on some kind of a flaming bandwagon, you're not helping. You're just not. Can you try to be that responsible person that has the maturity to be able to contribute in a good way in all the places where you engage outside and with the external world. To me, a life would be a lot better place if we could find the civility. I have a chapter on civility in my book.
Mm-hmm.
The civility and the maturity to be able to contribute to your country and not bring it down in a way that can be like the million small things that contribute to a disunited, divided, polarized country that can't seem to get its act together, that allows emotion to take over at a time when we really need to unite together on so many issues. And that takes patience. It takes, being an evolved person. But I would encourage young people to start practicing being that person that you really admire. That is the one that's engaging. Pretend that you're them, right? And then do what they would do. And I think you can start to contribute in a small way to changing things for the better, because the course that we're on right now is not a good trajectory. And we are not going to be able to solve our problems if we think we can do them, in our own little tribes alone. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. No, totally agree. And it's great advice, and I think that's going to take a degree of courage on each of us to step outside of our comfort zone and deal with some of these tough issues.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Ray, thanks for the time. These are really important things to talk about. And hopefully people had the stomach to listen to the whole podcast. I mean, there's people get just touch and go so often, but we did talk about some really important things. And look, people like you and me, we don't have an agenda. We're just trying to offer up ideas that can help, people around us. We do have a little experience to add in, right? We're older.
Yeah.
And we want to see the best for our country and the people who live in it. So anyway, thanks for allowing us to unpack some of these issues.
Well, thank you, Mike. I appreciate you being on the podcast, and it's always great to have the opportunity to just sit down and chat with you.
Yeah, you too, Randy.
Okay.
Happy to do it again anytime.
Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
See you.
Thank you for joining us on the Leadership Crucible podcast. If you enjoyed today's content, make sure you tap on the subscribe button, share this with a friend, and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. For more resources, check out the description below, sign up for our monthly newsletter, and visit our website at theleadershipcruciblefoundation.org. Feel free to leave us a comment and connect with us on social media at the links below. We'll see you next time.